Okay, so here's a little diagram that kind of explains what the surpluses look like. And again, what the difference is. So we have consumer surplus. Again, it's defined as how much money or the monetary gain that a consumer will get when they're able to purchase the product cheaper than what they thought they were going to spend. Yay, I got a sale. Look at me. I got 20 bucks left over. That kind of idea. So this is the consumer surplus calculation or function. This will be on your formula sheet. You don't have to memorize it, but you got to know what all these things mean, right? So, CS, consumer surplus, long squiggly S, integrate, right? This thing here, I'm going to circle it in blue. Maybe you can see the different color. Q sub 0, Q at 0. Remember in the week 2 of semester, maybe week 3, we found the equilibrium. So that just means the equilibrium quantity. Equilibrium meaning when demand is the same as supply, right? Perfect storm. You produce the same amount as people want. Yay, everyone wins. So equilibrium quantity, okay? Here, P sub 0 is equilibrium price. Equilibrium quantity, equilibrium price. You'll see those two values repeated in the producer surplus. They're the same equilibrium quantity and the same equilibrium price. Equilibrium means they're the same. Yeah. So, CS, consumer surplus, you integrate this function, the demand function, minus the equilibrium price, and evaluate it from the equilibrium quantity and 0. Okay, we're going to do a couple of examples, but that's what that means. And that's going to be on your formula sheet. You don't have to memorize it, but you have to know what all those pieces are. The producer surplus, by contrast, is the amount of money that the producer gains, right, by selling at a market price that's higher than the least they'd be willing to sell for. Again, because the demand is because the demand is higher, they can ask a higher price. So like, hey, we got a bonus. We got this producer surplus. So, producer surplus is evaluate. So you integrate the equilibrium price minus the supply function, and you evaluate between that same equilibrium quantity and 0. So where are the hurdles? Where are the places where you might get stuck? First thing is consumer surplus is using the demand function because consumers demand, right? They demand product or service. So you've got to be given the demand function, right? And we use that for the consumer surplus. Producers supply, right? They supply goods or service. So when we're looking at the producer surplus, we use the supply function, okay? So that will be given to us. So let's look at how we approach this. We're going to be given a supply and demand function. Okay, for a second here. What I find is the majority of students are successful in finding the equilibrium price and quantity. That's cool. Usually they're small linear functions. In fact, some of them are fractions, but on the final exam, we've made sure they're decimals, so you don't even have to go, oh no, fractions, right? And then most students are able to find the consumer surplus. The problem begins with producer surplus because you're taking that equilibrium price and you are subtracting a function, not right? So remember how we have the bracket, and if you don't and you're subtracting a function like the cost function, if you don't put it in brackets and put that negative sign over each of the terms in the bracket, the whole thing goes sideways, right? So this is where students may run into challenges if they don't put those brackets in. That's it. This is a long kind of procedural question, and you'll get part marks along the way. So don't worry. I think this question is worth 8 or 10 marks because it takes time, and it's a lengthy process. Okay, so let's look at. So the first thing we're going to do is find equilibrium point, equilibrium price and quantity. Whoops. No, erase. There we are. Equilibrium price and quantity. Then we set up consumer surplus and producer surplus functions. Right? And we'd evaluate those. I'm going to go back. That doesn't matter which one we do first. Okay, so suppose the supply and demand functions of a certain item are given by these two functions. Okay, so we have S at Q is equal to 7/5 Q, and we have D at Q is equal to minus 3/5 Q plus 10. Okay, so when we have the supply and demand function, we can say the price at a supply of 7/5 Q, or the demand price at a demand of minus 3/5 Q plus 10. So the S at Q and the D at Q really represent the price for a given supply and the price for a given demand. Okay, so that'll come up later because you'll say to me, why is it P? How did we know that? Yeah. So the first step, it says, is find the equilibrium point. So find the P and Q that they share, that they have in common. So literally finding it equal, we set them equal to equal to each other, right? So S at Q equal D at Q. We just set them equal to each other, okay? And then, of course, these are fractions, so we are going to combine. We've got two Q terms. We're going to combine them. We're lucky in this case that both of the fractions have the same denominator. Remember, when you're adding or subtracting, you need the same denominator. So I'm going to add 3/5 Q to both sides. Yeah? So I have 10/5 plus 3/5. 10/5 Q is equal to 10. Yeah? So 10 divided by 5, 2Q is equal to 10. Q equals 5, yeah? Okay. So our equilibrium point is going to be Q and P, right? So we can go back and use either the supply function or the demand function now to solve for P. So I have P equals 7/5 Q, right? It's only one term, so I'm going to pick that supply function to use. In this case, we found that Q is 5, so I have 7/5 times 5, right? And so P is 7, yeah? So my point of equilibrium, where P and Q are the same for both the supply and the demand function, is going to be 5 and 7. So their equilibrium Q and equilibrium P, right? Set them equal to each other and solve for those two values, okay? So right there, we've moved this forward, right? So now let's look at our next step, and that is setting up the consumer surplus. So consumer surplus. I'm going to write it down. You're going to see it on your formula sheet. We integrate and evaluate from the equilibrium quantity to 0 of the demand function, because consumers demand, minus the equilibrium price, and that dq is just the derivative, like we're integrating and evaluating. Okay, so our equilibrium quantity is 5. Our demand function, let's go back up and see what that was. It was minus 3/5 Q plus 10, yeah? Minus 3/5 Q plus 10 minus the equilibrium price, which is 7, yeah? Right? So I'm going to simplify, right? I'm going to simplify, I'm not doing anything with integration yet. So 10 minus 7 will be 3 plus 3, yeah? Okay, so now we're able to do the integration process. And again, we've got two terms. We have 3/5 Q plus 3, okay? So now when we have the integral, I guess that's not actually accurate. We draw the straight line just to say, okay, well now we've got the integral. Doesn't matter. Just putting it there. Minus 3/5 Q used to have a Q squared, right? So now we take that 3/5 and we divide by 2. Plus 3 used to have a Q, 3Q. So that's now our integral. So you might be looking at this and go, what the heck do I do with that? Right? Oh my goodness. She throws this dividing fractions thing in the last week. Remember, on the final exam, they're going to be decimals, not fractions. But what do we do with this? Okay. So minus 3/5 divided by 2 over 1. Yeah? Yeah? Remember the invert and multiply? So that's the same as minus 3/5 times 1 over 2. Don't worry. Decimals. So that's minus 3 over 10. Because when we're multiplying, we multiply the numerator by the other numerator, and we multiply the denominator by the denominator. So multiply the tops, multiply the bottoms. Okay.
Is there fractions at all in the exam or just for?
No. Just because I love them, I know not everyone does. I told you I did my master's paper on fractions, didn't I?
Oh my god, no.
Yeah, I did.
I get lost with fractions.
Just remember doing fractions
And Kumon, yeah, sure. I did it's called a concept study of fractions, and I actually put it on LinkedIn. I put my research question on LinkedIn and got an international perspective on how do they see fractions in their culture, and how do they teach fractions in their culture. And
That's cool.
I ended up getting way more data than I wanted because it means, yeah, so, but it was very cool. So now, gosh, we have found the equilibrium. We have integrated. Now the last step is to evaluate between 5 and 0. So we substitute minus 3/10 5 squared plus 3 times 5 minus, okay, 0, right? Minus 0? There's a whole story that goes to that. I ended up in a whole Polish conversation at the floor. Not gonna tell you, but anyway.
Yeah, my class just finished their exam.
Miner's gonna write that too.
Good luck, guys. I gotta go get Owen.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
See ya. Yay. So 25 squared. So what do we have here? Minus 7.5 plus 15. $7.50 surplus. Okay, here's a hint. If your surplus is negative, you've done something drastically wrong. You can't have a surplus that's negative, right? It's surplus. It's got to be positive. No, not for this. Yeah, not for this one. And what you'll also note, because you know in math, patterns are awesome, and you'll see that you have a negative 7.5 and a positive twice as much, right? And again, when you look back at that graph, that accounts for that. So if you see anything outside of that, you might question your calculation or your integration, or maybe you forgot to integrate. I see that a lot too. So don't rush, take your steps, right? Write them down if you need to. Okay, so consumer surplus. That means consumers saved $7.50 more than they anticipated they were gonna get. So the next thing we do is find the producer's surplus. Okay, so producer's surplus is you integrate and evaluate between the equilibrium quantity and 0 of the equilibrium price minus the supply function. Again, because producers supply stuff. Yeah. So, did we write down the supply function? Just so we have it. It is, wait for it. Oops, way up here. 7/5 Q.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go back down here. And okay, all right. Wow, see how much work there is? Right? Lots to do. Okay, we're going to integrate and evaluate between 5, which is the equilibrium quantity, of the equilibrium price, which, what did we say that was? 7? Yeah, 7? 7 minus, and then we have the supply function. So we're kind of lucky, not lucky. This is an example where we only have one term of the supply function. Our next example, we're going to have a constant after, and it's gonna really highlight how you've got to apply that negative sign over the whole function, yeah? So integrate, let's see, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna rearrange this, maybe, minus 7/5 q plus 7. I just turned the terms around. I don't know, it doesn't matter, honestly, but I just wanted the greater degree term. Okay, so integrate, let's do it. We have minus 7/5 q squared, which meant we have to divide by 2, plus 7q. And we're going to evaluate from 0 and 5, between 0 and 5. So again, as an aside, we have minus 7/5 divided by 2 over 1, which is the same as minus 7/5 times 1/2. So we have minus 7 over 10. If you're sitting there going, I don't know how she does this fraction thing, again, don't worry, final exam, decimals, yeah? Okay. Minus 7/10 q squared plus 7q. Now we substitute. Minus 7/10 times 5 squared plus 7 times 5 minus 0. Yeah? 5 squared, 25 times 7 is 175 divided by 10. Minus 1750 plus 35. Right? Yep, 1750. Okay. So the producers benefit from getting a higher price for their product than they anticipated, and their surplus is $17.50. Yeah? So if I wanted to kind of summarize, we find equilibrium, right? Then we simplify, I guess, the consumer surplus and producer surplus. We integrate. Uh-oh. We evaluate. And then interpret. And interpret is really like, what does that mean? What does the consumer surplus mean? What does the producer surplus mean? Okay. So let's try one more example, right? So you've got like a second thing to draw on, and then And then we'll be good, and the recording will be here for you to review, okay? Let's see. All right, let's see. And you know what? We can convert this to decimals if you're happier with that too. This is the example that's given at the front of, like in the notes for week 13. So if you want to refer to it, well, this is the easier way to do it, or the better way to refer. We're going to walk through it. Okay, so if I looked at the supply function, 1/2, convert that to a decimal, 0.5, right? So let's do that. Okay. And our demand function, -3/4. So if you have 3/4, you have 75 cents, right? That's 0.75. Q plus 16. Do we agree? Those are equivalent decimals? Yeah? Okay. So equilibrium. Find the equilibrium. Equilibrium. And Q and P. Equal meaning set them equal to each other and solve. Okay. So get all the Q terms on one side, the constants on the other. So we're going to add 0.75 Q to that side, right? So if I have 75 cents and 50 cents, I should have 1.25 Q on that side? Yeah? And then 16 minus 1 is 15 on the other side? Q is 12, yeah? Okay. So if Q is 12, that's our first in the point, and then I would choose, it's the who what? Yeah. I would pick probably the supply function to substitute it, because we can do that in our head. Half a Q, half of 12 is 6 plus 1, yeah? So 7. So our, we have our equilibrium quantity and our equilibrium price. Yay. Okay, first step. Then we set up the consumer surplus. Again, that's the one that's less problematic, right? Because we're subtracting a whole, the equilibrium price. So we're going to integrate and evaluate between 12 and 0 of, let's see, the demand function, which is what? What is our demand function? -3/4 Q plus 16 minus the equilibrium price. Yeah? Okay. How did I get to 7? I substituted 12 into either the supply function or the demand function. I picked the supply function because it's like half of Q plus 1. So half of 12 is 6 plus 1 is 7. Yeah. The other one was -3/4 times. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to pick the simplest function. So at this point, I'm able to simplify. So 16 minus 7 here. So that's going to be 9. Is it 9? So I still haven't done any integrating. I've literally just substituted and simplified and, yeah? So now, don't forget, you've got to integrate, yeah? So I have minus, oh, did we go back to 3/4? Sorry. I'm gonna change that back to decimal, very sorry. I was thinking, okay. So minus 0.75 q squared divided by q is divided by 2 plus 9q, yeah? Okay. Hi,
Okay.
what's up?
Okay, like I'm here from, okay, like I can show you.
We're in the middle of class right now.
Because the class hasn't finished yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm here for accounting.
I know you're here for school tutor, but the class hasn't finished yet. You can like stay until.
Oh, okay. You can sit at the back
Yeah.
quietly or come back in about 10 minutes if that would work? What do you think?
It's just that
I see here for you, Michael?
Yeah, right.
I have homework to do.
Scheduled from 6 to 7.
Yeah.
It's like mass cancels in the group tutor, right?
Yeah.
So the student booked for the session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think maybe he can come and right?
Yeah, go ahead, or come at the
Just
back,
sit here
please.
and wait till the class to be ended.
Feel welcome.
May I just have a family?
Yeah, go. Yep, you're good. Okay, so then we are going to simplify, so 0.75, what have we got? 0.375? Q squared plus 9q. And then substitute. Yeah? And then we get, what do we get? Yep, I'm scrolling up. Good? Let me know if you need anything in the week.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm also looking at maybe booking a final exam review, 2
Okay.
hours, just drop in from noon to 2 on Friday.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll post it. Literally, I'll be there in a Zoom room. If you show up and you need help, I'll be there. If you don't show up,
Okay.
I won't, I'll still be there
Okay.
for all of you. Yeah?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, no problem. What do we get here? Sorry? Is it 54? Yeah, 54?
Yeah.
Okay, so $54. Okay, that's your consumer surplus. And we're going to do the same for producer surplus. So producer surplus, we are going to,
Wait, is it 54?
I think it's 54.
It is 54 because it's like
12 squared is 144
that's
times,
54, but what about 12 and 9? 9 times 12, it's 108, then you minus 54.
yeah, it's the whole,
because
yeah,
it's a positive minus negative 54, 108, and then it's 54.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the consumer surplus, sorry, producer surplus, we're going to integrate and evaluate the equilibrium price minus, producer's supply, so the supply function. And in this case, the supply function is 0. Well, I'm going to put the supply function in, sorry. Let's go back up a bit. Right? Okay, now we can substitute. I have from 12 to 0 of 7 minus, and then the supply function is 0.5 q plus 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so remember, this is where things can go sideways. We have to apply that negative sign over both terms in the bracket, right? So we have 7 minus 0.5q minus 1. Yeah? Okay. Simplify, I'm going to say we have negative 0.5q plus 6. Yeah? That's 7 minus 1 plus 6. Then I can integrate. And I have q squared, negative 0.5 divided by 2 plus 6q. Yeah? So 0.5 divided by 2, negative 0.25 q squared plus 6q. And then you're substituting 12 and 0. Yeah? And now this is the producer surplus, what they gain from selling something at a higher price than they anticipated. $36?
36, yeah.
Yeah, $36. Okay, super. So those are your two examples. Again, decimals will be on the final exam as opposed to fractions.